Now, disturbing new details have emerged about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, of course, formerly known as Prince Andrew, and of course, Sarah Ferguson's bizarre final days in the Royal Lodge.
A somber hush settled over the royal sphere the moment the palace released its brief but chilling statement about Sarah Ferguson's future. What began as a routine update quickly spiraled into a revelation that blindsided even those closest to her. Behind the carefully chosen words lurked motives far more complicated than anyone expected. Motives now forcing the world to question what truly unfolded behind closed doors. But what tragic truth did the palace finally confirm, and why are insiders insisting that the hidden motives behind it change everything? The tragic announcement the palace tried to control. Just before the sun rose on November 27th, something happened at Buckingham Palace that no one believed possible. A decision so sharp, cold, and unexpected tore through decades of royal tradition. Inside the palace's press room, where announcements are usually calm and predictable, a senior aide stepped in, looking shaken, almost ghost-like. His hands trembled slightly as he carried a sealed envelope, the kind used only for the most serious royal declarations. Everyone in the room sensed that whatever lay inside would change a life forever. And it did. The message he read was short, but it landed like a thunderclap. Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, was being stripped of all remaining royal provisions. Effective immediately. No grace period, no transition, no comforting words, just a sharp, final cut. Within minutes, the world reacted. News stations in Britain, the United States, and across Europe dropped their planned segments and switched to breaking coverage. Commentators sat forward in their chairs, scrambling to understand how such a drastic move could unfold without warning. One American news anchor stared into the camera, confusion turning into alarm. "This isn't clarification," she said slowly. "This is expulsion." Outside the palace gates, the shock was even more personal. Older royal fans, many of whom had followed Sarah's journey since the 1980s, stood in stunned silence. They remembered the spirited young duchess who brought warmth, color, and laughter to the monarchy alongside Princess Diana. They remembered the woman who, despite scandals and setbacks, tried to rebuild her life. And now, with a single announcement, it felt as though the palace had erased her completely, wiping away not only her royal role, but her history, her contributions, and her connection to the crown. But the truth behind the scenes was far more complicated and far more unsettling. This wasn't a sudden decision made overnight. This was not a punishment for a single mistake or a reaction to one scandal.
Not on. And all the brothers were, so I took them out of their grave, poor loves, and said, "Come on."
It was part of a long-running, carefully calculated plan. For years, the monarchy had been slowly, quietly creating distance between Sarah and the crown. Every small step, every reduced appearance, every withheld privilege, every silent shift had been building toward this moment. Why? Because the Duchess carries something the palace fears: knowledge. She has seen internal tensions no outsider knows. She has witnessed decisions shaped by panic, rivalry, fear, and politics. She understands the personalities behind the public masks, and she has lived through some of the monarchy's most turbulent chapters. Exiling her wasn't just for appearances. It was a shield, a calculated move to guard an institution gripped by fear. Fear of the secrets she carried, of the explosive truths that could emerge if she ever dared to speak without restraint, exposing the hidden cracks within the royal world. By 6:40 a.m., the world had reached one clear, unshakable conclusion. Sarah Ferguson had not only lost a privilege, she had been pushed out of the royal world completely, not gently, not quietly, but with a force that suggested something deeper, older, and far more strategic than anyone had imagined. A royal chapter had ended, and whatever comes next will not be quiet. Sarah Ferguson has lost all the privileges that come with royal support. But what could have led to such a dramatic fall from royal favor? Now, let's uncover how years of warnings and hidden risks pushed the Duchess of York out of the royal orbit. To truly grasp why Buckingham Palace made such a decisive and shocking move, one must look beyond the sensational headlines and into a quiet story that unfolded over many years, a story the public never fully saw. For decades, Sarah Ferguson's position seemed stable, even secure. She lived comfortably at Royal Lodge, attended private family gatherings, and maintained a public presence through charitable endeavors. Under Queen Elizabeth, her missteps were tolerated, forgiven quietly behind closed doors, and her colorful past did little to threaten her place in the royal orbit. To outsiders, she appeared untouchable, protected by nostalgia and her long-standing connection to the family. But the ascension of King Charles changed everything. With a vision to modernize the monarchy, he faced the twin pressures of political scrutiny and a rapidly evolving global media landscape. Social media, online scrutiny, and 24-hour news cycles meant that every misstep could be magnified worldwide in an instant. Under this new era, Sarah's presence, once an accepted eccentricity, became a complication. More than that, she became a liability, a threat to the careful image of a crown, trying to evolve and survive. The challenges were structural as much as personal. Sarah held no official title, carried no royal responsibilities, and had no defined role within the institution. Internal documents and briefing notes revealed rising public frustration, particularly among older Americans, the very demographic that had long adored her for her vivacity and charm. Even Princess Catherine, during routine briefings, noticed Sarah's name appearing repeatedly as a reputational concern. The questions grew louder. Why was a non-working duchess, embroiled in unresolved controversies and linked to scandal, still occupying a crown estate while the monarchy faced scrutiny at home and abroad?
So I kind of have this sort of.
Behind the palace walls, preparations for a potential separation had been quietly underway for years. Every conversation about the Royal Lodge seemed to circle back to Sarah, and every financial review noted her continued presence as an anomaly. Political nudges from Westminster to protect itself, it could no longer shield Sarah Ferguson. Even inside the family, the tension was palpable. Catherine, observing the household's inner workings, noticed changes in the dynamic between Andrew and Sarah. Where there had once been stability, there was now quiet strain. Staff reported prolonged periods of separation within the home, and whispered concerns about the Duchess's reputation began surfacing in strategy meetings. Across the Atlantic, American media began revisiting her past associations, reigniting conversations that Sarah had long hoped were behind her. By the end of 2023, the palace reached a clear, unavoidable conclusion. The unraveling was complete. Every warning, every signal, every quiet discussion had pointed to the same outcome. The decision to sever her ties with royal support was no longer a choice. It was a necessity. For Sarah Ferguson, the consequences were tragic, deeply personal, and devastating. But for the monarchy, the calculation was clear. The survival and credibility of the institution came first. In this modern era, sentiment could no longer outweigh strategy, and even a duchess once cherished by millions could be quietly, firmly, and irrevocably pushed out of the orbit she had long called home. The monarchy could not risk its reputation by continuing to protect Sarah Ferguson. But what evidence compelled them to take such a decisive step? And was it enough to justify it? Let's uncover the details. From concern to action. By November, what had once been quiet deliberation within Buckingham Palace had escalated into a full-blown strategy session. The public, upon seeing the announcement, would later interpret it as sudden, even harsh. But inside the palace walls, every move had been carefully calculated over weeks, months, and even years. This was not a reactionary decision. It was a meticulously orchestrated plan aimed at safeguarding the monarchy's long-term image, reputation, and stability. At the center of this careful maneuvering stood Queen Camilla. Known for her political insight, public awareness, and deft handling of complex royal optics, Camilla quickly recognized the growing problem. Her daily briefings painted a troubling picture. American media outlets were no longer quietly observing Sarah Ferguson's life. They were amplifying her connection to Prince Andrew's scandals with renewed vigor. Headlines resurfaced old controversies, revived past mistakes, and framed her as a continuing liability for the crown on the international stage. In response, a private crisis meeting was convened. The room, shielded from casual observation, was thick with tension. Advisors, legal experts, and communication strategists laid out the evidence with unflinching clarity. References to Epstein, renewed and widely publicized. Financial missteps from years past resurfacing in the media, heightened congressional attention in the United States, and rising criticism from the public in both Britain and abroad. Every fact, every whisper, pointed to one undeniable truth. Sarah Ferguson was no longer merely a non-working royal. She had transformed into a living reminder of hidden dangers, a symbol of the unpredictable risks the monarchy could never ignore, a figure whose presence alone made them uneasy. Princess Anne, known for her unwavering frankness,
Street Child is so good, is that Children in Crisis were in the field in Sierra Leone, saw Tom's work.
Faced the audience with her characteristic sharpness. "We're shaping the future, not clinging to the past," she declared, her voice leaving no room for doubt. Each word struck like a precise blade, slicing through hesitation and sentimentality alike. The message was unmistakable. The monarchy must move forward, guided by pragmatism, not nostalgia. In that moment, her clarity made it impossible to ignore the truth. The crown's reputation and survival demanded courage over comfort. The message to all advisors was unmistakable. This was not about personal feelings or private grudges. It was about survival, about shielding the institution from potential scandal, public outrage, and international scrutiny. Sarah Ferguson, for all her charm and decades of experience within royal circles, represented precisely the type of unpredictability and insider knowledge that could ignite chaos if ever exposed. Every detail of her removal, from the timing to the wording of the public statement, was scrutinized and refined. The palace aimed to convey authority, decisiveness, and necessity without descending into personal condemnation. To the outside world, it appeared abrupt, even cruel. To those inside Buckingham Palace, it was the inevitable outcome of years of observation, planning, and strategic foresight. The headlines, the shock, the social media frenzy. The palace anticipated it all, but they also knew something the public would never hear. The motives behind the action ran far deeper than a single scandal or misstep. This was a deliberate protective measure, a calculated severing intended to preserve the crown's future. Beneath the surface of public perception lay a reality few could fully grasp. The monarchy had acted not in anger, not in spite, but in cold, unyielding strategy. Sarah Ferguson's removal was more than a personal tragedy. It was a message, a warning, and a defining moment in the crown's ongoing effort to modernize and survive. Shocking evidence forced the monarchy to act against Sarah Ferguson. But why was she denied a chance to redeem herself? Now let's explore the hidden truth behind Sarah Ferguson's royal severance. The crown's motives exposed. Beneath the flashing headlines and the public's immediate shock, Buckingham Palace confronted a far deeper, more unsettling reality. Sarah Ferguson had, over decades, become more than just a former royal living in a crown estate. She had become a living symbol of the contradictions the monarchy desperately sought to escape. Her presence carried echoes of an era the family now viewed as turbulent, the age of public chaos, relentless media leaks, financial blunders, and scandals that had spun out of control. In this new era, however, nostalgia no longer shielded her. Internal analysis revealed a troubling trend. Audiences who had once celebrated her charm and vivacity were beginning to look away. Data pointed to a sharp decline in trust and admiration, particularly among the over 50 demographic, the very group historically considered the monarchy's most steadfast supporters. These were viewers who had grown up watching the York family, who remembered Sarah's laughter alongside Diana's warmth, and who now questioned why a woman with no official duties or formal responsibilities continued to enjoy royal privileges. The communications team presented King Charles and Queen Camilla with the stark numbers, highlighting an uncomfortable truth. The shifting sentiment among loyal viewers threatened not just Sarah's standing, but the monarchy's international reputation. Her continued presence risked casting the crown as out of touch, nostalgic for a past that had left chaos in its wake. The very people who had once reinforced the monarchy's image abroad were beginning to perceive it as protective of unresolved scandals, and that perception could not be ignored. Then came the comment that crystallized the palace's concern. During a strategy briefing, a young staffer leaned in quietly and observed, "People aren't seeing this as drama anymore. They're seeing it as a moral test." The room fell silent. That single, deceptively simple remark laid bare the hidden fear that had been building for months. If the monarchy continued to shelter Sarah Ferguson, it risked appearing morally compromised, complicit in controversies it could neither control nor publicly defend. This understanding reframed every discussion that followed. What the public perceived as a cold, bureaucratic decision, an abrupt removal from Royal Lodge, and a withdrawal of privileges, was, in reality, a meticulously calculated statement. Every word of the official announcement, every carefully timed media release, was designed to communicate one unambiguous message: Sarah Ferguson was no longer the palace's responsibility, morally, politically, or publicly. The line had been drawn, and it was irrevocable.
And we went into this nightclub, and she was very good at her costume.
The tragic irony was unavoidable. Her departure had little to do with the house she occupied and everything to do with the monarchy's survival. By severing ties, the Crown was sending a broader signal to domestic and international audiences alike that no individual, regardless of past charm or family connection, could imperil the institution's future. The palace acted decisively, sacrificing one beloved yet problematic figure to protect the continuity, credibility, and moral authority of the monarchy. In the end, Sarah Ferguson's removal was more than a personal blow. It was a lesson in consequence, a testament to the Crown's determination to modernize, and a stark reminder that even those who once shone brightly within royal circles could be cut loose when history, optics, and morality demanded it. Sarah Ferguson no longer represents the monarchy morally, politically, or publicly, forcing the palace to act decisively to protect its future. But how was she pushed aside? And what does this mean for her personally? Now let's uncover the palace statement that changed everything. Sarah Ferguson's abrupt severance. At precisely 7:20 a.m., Buckingham Palace released the statement that would reverberate across the globe. The words, brief and formal, spread like wildfire, traveling from London to New York, Washington, and beyond in moments. The message confirmed what many had feared but few truly expected. Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, would immediately lose all housing, security, and institutional support provided by the Crown. There would be no transitional grace, no soft landing, only a clean, irrevocable break. For Sarah herself, the impact was instantaneous. Sitting alone in a quiet London hotel room, she read the statement, each word striking colder than the last. The tone was impersonal, stark, and final, leaving no room for interpretation. In that moment, decades of life intertwined with the royal orbit, years of public attention, personal compromises, moments of both triumph and humiliation, collapsed in an instant. The world she had known, once glittering with privilege and connection, felt as if it had been pulled away beneath her feet. The media, swift as ever, pounced. Overnight, her history was reframed and dissected under the harsh glare of public scrutiny. Headlines resurrected failed business ventures, resurfaced past scandals, renewed references to her association with Epstein, and revived financial missteps that had once been quietly swept aside. Every effort Sarah had made to rebuild her reputation through charity work, public appearances, and personal projects was suddenly overshadowed by the palace's decisive severance. Her story, once of resilience and recovery, was reframed as one of loss and public rejection. Yet beyond the headlines, a deeper, less visible drama was unfolding. Inside Buckingham Palace, aides and advisors felt a quiet tension, a lingering fear that extended far beyond optics. Sarah Ferguson was no ordinary former royal. She had intimate knowledge of the palace's inner workings, personal insights spanning decades, and a history of speaking candidly when cornered or marginalized. The institution's concern was not merely reputational, it was strategic. What might Sarah do now that her official ties had been severed?
And how right she was. And today we talk about Lisa Marie. We look at Priscilla.
How might her knowledge, her voice, or her connections ripple into the public domain if she chose to speak freely? As the world reeled from the startling announcement, the palace stayed watchful, fully aware that this decision, though deemed necessary, carried undeniable risk. Within the royal household, everyone grasped the gravity of Sarah's exit. It was far more than a routine administrative step. She was being stripped not only of privileges, but also of the protective shield surrounding her within the monarchy. Beneath the composed facade of protocol, a quiet, unspoken fear lingered. Once untethered, Sarah could act in ways no one could predict, potentially revealing secrets, insights, or perspectives that the palace had neither prepared for nor could entirely control. For the public, the morning of November 27th marked a turning point, a clear and dramatic severing of ties. For the palace, it was a calculated act of risk management, balancing reputation, institutional survival, and the delicate art of royal discretion. And for Sarah Ferguson, it was a deeply personal moment of loss, uncertainty, and perhaps the beginning of a chapter in which her choices and the palace's fears would continue to collide. She was stripped of her honor, residence, and all institutional support from the monarchy. But does she have any alternatives left? Or have all her options been cut off as well? Let's find out. The Duchess left out in the cold. The slow, almost imperceptible unraveling of Sarah Ferguson's public life didn't explode onto the headlines with fanfare or royal proclamations. It crept in quietly through a string of deliberate, subtle retreats, one charity after another, distancing itself from the Duchess of York. Each withdrawal fell like a soft yet chilling toll of a bell, reverberating through the fragile structure of her world. What seemed like minor losses gradually painted a stark picture. A woman once at the center of attention now facing isolation, scrutiny, and an uncertain future. The first to act was Julia's House, a respected children's hospice known for its compassion and its careful attention to public image. For years, the organization had valued Ferguson's support, gladly welcoming her presence at events and fundraisers. But suddenly, the same doors that had once opened for her began to close. Their statement was brief but piercing. They said it had become inappropriate for her to continue in her role.
I'm the generational bridge because I'm still very young, in case you hadn't realized. Yeah, exactly.
No dramatic accusations, no emotional explanations, just a single, sharp word, inappropriate, that said more than paragraphs ever could. And with that, the first thread of her public identity came loose. But the unraveling didn't stop there. Once Julia's House took the first step, other charities began to reassess their ties to the Duchess. Soon, the Teenage Cancer Trust announced it too, would no longer keep her on as a patron. The decision came quietly. Yet, it added more weight to the already growing sense that Ferguson was being pushed out of positions she had once held with pride. Then came the Natasha Allergy Research Foundation, followed by the Children's Literacy Charity, the National Foundation for Retired Service Animals, and Prevent Breast Cancer. These organizations represented a wide range of causes: children, health, education, even retired service animals. Yet they all reached the same conclusion: the Duchess could no longer serve as their patron. Each departure was like another door swinging shut, narrowing her public path and shrinking the world she had worked so hard to build after decades of turbulence. These were not minor affiliations. They were meaningful roles that had once allowed her to reshape her public image and connect with ordinary people far beyond palace walls. Losing them meant losing stability, purpose, and the warm public goodwill she had spent years rebuilding. And then the most symbolic blow arrived. The British Heart Foundation, one of the largest and most respected charities in the UK, confirmed that Ferguson would no longer continue as its ambassador. This was not just a quiet withdrawal. It felt like the final confirmation that a shift had taken place, not just in public opinion, but in how institutions viewed her future, her reputation, and her value in high-profile public work. Taken one by one, these decisions might seem small, but together, they paint a startling picture. A woman once welcomed by charitable organizations across the country, now finding herself gently but firmly moved aside. No accusations, no heated statements, just a collective sense that something had changed, and her presence could no longer serve these causes in the way it once did. In the end, the story's not only about the charities that stepped away, but about the message their decisions quietly send. Sarah Ferguson's once steady public role is shifting, and the world around her is changing in ways she can no longer control. The charities she once represented as ambassador or patron have also severed ties with her. What options does she have left, and what does this mean for the monarchy? Now let's explore Sarah Ferguson's uncertain future. The fallout after the palace severed ties. In the hours that followed Buckingham Palace's unprecedented announcement, Sarah Ferguson was forced to confront a reality she had never truly imagined. The world she had known, the orbit she had inhabited for decades, had been stripped away in a single cold stroke. She no longer had a place within the monarchy, no royal house to return to, no familiar corridors echoing with history, no security team to shield her from scrutiny or potential threats, no official role to lend purpose or legitimacy, no institutional protection to buffer her from the public gaze, and perhaps most profoundly, no clear path back, a future once defined by privilege and position now uncertain and uncharted. Her daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, moved swiftly and decisively. Recognizing both the personal and practical implications of the palace's decision, they orchestrated a discreet relocation for their mother to Portugal, ensuring her safety, privacy, and immediate needs were met. Every detail, from travel logistics to accommodations, was meticulously arranged. In these quiet acts of care, the family attempted to construct a buffer between Sarah and the unpredictable whirlwind of global media, public opinion, and institutional consequences. Yet inside the palace, the atmosphere was heavy with sober realism.
I think, Andrew, actually you designed it, didn't you?
I helped in this design. What do you mean with sketches and things?
The monarchy had acted according to what it believed was necessary for its long-term survival. Yet even among those charged with upholding tradition and protocol, there was an unspoken understanding that the risk was far from over. Removing Sarah Ferguson may have resolved an immediate problem, but it also introduced a new set of uncertainties. Sarah's unpredictability was a central concern. She carries decades of intimate knowledge about the monarchy, secrets, routines, and insights no outsider possesses. She has witnessed events few can imagine, and now, untethered from obligations of loyalty, silence, or duty, she had nothing left to lose. Her history of candid, unfiltered commentary, paired with the freedom her separation granted, posed a potential threat to the institution she had long been a part of. This is the uncomfortable truth the palace cannot, and will not, admit publicly. While the removal may have been deemed necessary, it may also have created a risk far greater than leaving her within the fold. The Crown had acted strategically, balancing public perception, international scrutiny, and institutional preservation. But for Sarah Ferguson, the decision was devastating. A sudden, forceful ejection from the world she had long inhabited, leaving her to navigate a reality she had never chosen. For the millions watching around the globe, that day sparked a chilling, lingering question. What unfolds when someone rejected by the Crown, someone who possesses insider knowledge, years of experience, and no sense of duty holding them back, chooses to reveal the unvarnished truth? The consequences are anything but simple. They could ripple across institutions, shake public perception, and ignite controversy in ways no one could foresee. Every eye turned to wonder, what will happen next? For the monarchy, cutting ties with Sarah was a deliberate, carefully planned decision, meant to assert control and send a clear message. For Sarah herself, it was a shattering personal crisis, tearing away not just her place within the royal household, but a part of her very identity. For the world watching, it unfolds as a gripping drama of suspense and intrigue. The fall of a duchess is more than news. It is the opening of a complex, unfolding story that tests the fragile limits of loyalty, influence, and the cost of power. So, what do you think about Sarah Ferguson? Could she really survive without the royal support? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.